Hello everybody, welcome back to the Namaste podcast. Today I have an amazing guest, Sex Shaman, Joy Mittens with me, and we're going to talk about all things shamanic, sacred sexual healing, menstrual blood, and we're going to dive into Joy's story about reclaiming her empowerment of yourself and your sexuality. So, how about we dive in with a bit about your story and what's led you to be here today?
Oh.
In all honesty, we did just film 5 minutes. I always said I'd be authentic on this podcast. We did just film 5 minutes and someone called me because I forgot to go in airplane mode. So you're going to repeat yourself. But the start of the podcast was amazing.
Okay, so I was talking about the start of my journey and how it all began. And if I have to pinpoint one moment when it all began, it's when I was 23. And I came to the conclusion that maybe I'd never had an orgasm. And this was like hugely shameful, like for me. There was no way I could speak to anyone, or like not my partner, not my friends, like, and so I remember being in this place of like, what do I do? So I asked the internet, of course.
You do.
And it's like the internet, what does an orgasm feel like? And mostly it was very unhelpful, like some things about it's a bit like a sneeze.
Really?
Mostly it was just like when you know when you've had one, you just like know. So I was like, well, like, that probably means I haven't. And yeah, so I kind of got the idea that self-pleasure was important, or masturbation, through reading these sites. And the next question I asked was, what, like, how to masturbate, like, because it's not something I'd done, actually.
Yeah.
Like, it's something I'd very much shut down. The few memories I have of being a child and exploring, I kind of came to this point where, like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, and then stopping. So, yeah, it's like, how to masturbate. And
as a female as well.
Yeah.
Because like for growing up, it always seemed like a topic that was a lot more accessible to talk about and easier to talk about for men. And like you said just before when we were filming, there still is a lot of shame around male pleasure, but at least you can express it. At least men could go to each other or have that locker room talk, which I don't think is healthy in itself. But even as female, I never experienced that when I was younger. I tried to bring up the topic of masturbation to my friends, and I remember feeling like it was something I shouldn't be doing. But I wanted to talk about it and know more and discuss it with the people who I cared about and was close to, and it got shut down pretty quickly. Yeah. Like, it's personal, it's not something we should talk about, it's not something we should share. And even if you do masturbate, like, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember at school there was a lot of ridicule of boys to being like, oh, he's a tosser or whatever. But like, with women, with girls, it was just nothing. Just completely nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, can girls even do that? So yeah. So like, internet, how do you masturbate? And I actually found some good advice, which was to go find a mirror and go check yourself out down there and just kind of explore a little bit. So I kind of did this. I got a mirror, got undressed, was feeling very uncomfortable being naked, which is something I realized that even when I'm alone, I still like, I would get changed and I would like do the top half and then the bottom half. I wouldn't like take everything off. Like, to have a shower or a bath, then that's kind of the only time. And when I was with my partner, even when we've been together like 3 years, it was like, you turn the lights off before I get undressed.
Yeah.
Or at least I did.
I remember with my first boyfriend, always lights had to be off, could not let him see me because there was so much self-image shame. And I don't know where that came from, and I think a lot of people don't know exactly where it comes from. It just seems to be ingrained, right?
Yeah, because I never remember ever like being told any of these things, or it just kind of happened.
And there was nobody actively trying to tell us otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nudity was an issue for me, and okay, make sure lock the door, make sure the windows are closed. So I got this mirror, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I remember feeling this feeling of just repulsion and disgust, and this was like a physical feeling in my body when I was looking at myself, and I was witnessing myself feeling these things and just thinking, this isn't right. It's not. I shouldn't be feeling this way about a part of my own body. So that's kind of where the consciousness came in, of
you became aware of how uncomfortable it felt to be looking at and to be with a part of your body which we call the Yoni, which is I would say a really beautiful word for the vagina, and it's a Sanskrit word. And what does it mean again?
The Yoni, it kind of means heavenly gate or divine place, or basically the gateway to the divine.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's actually, and Yoni kind of encompasses vagina and vulva as one thing. Where vulva is the outer part and the vagina is the inner part. And I know people in kind of sacred sexuality circles really don't like the word vagina, and I didn't at first, because it literally means sheath, as in for a sword. So it's kind of we're defining a part of our bodies relative to the man, which feels very patriarchal, until a very wise friend of mine pointed out that when a sword is in a sheath, then it's at peace. And then that kind of
okay. coming to learn to love the word. Yeah, that's beautiful. So after feeling that repulsion, what was it that drove you and brought a sense of do you know what, I don't want to feel this way? Did you actively do anything to start that journey of more self-empowerment and self-love for this part of your body?
It wasn't really a lot that I could find. I didn't really know what to do about it. I think I bought bought a vibrator. It wasn't really helping. And I went traveling. I went to a festival, a Burning Man type festival nowhere in Spain, and I remember it was also the first time I'd ever taken MDMA. So I was in this amazing space of people who are already kind of trying to smash the rules of society and just be free. And I remember running around the desert and okay, I took all my clothes off, ran through the gate, ran back and put them all back on again. And I remember feeling this kind of thing. And then the next day I remember we went to the river, and I went skinny dipping, and I even got into the river with my pants on, but then when I was in there I'm okay, I'll take them off. And I just remember this feeling of it really was, it made such a huge difference. It's just this, the water was kind of and I was completely naked, and I just felt this sense of being completely natural and free, and why does anyone wear clothes to get in the water?
Yeah.
You just end up with these wet things stuck to you. You have to change out of them really awkwardly.
You have to cover yourself as you dry yourself off.
Yeah.
I think it's the most natural thing we can do is be naked in water. One of the most natural things, because if you think about it, when we're in the womb, when we're coming into life, we are naked. It's not like we come into life with a t-shirt and shorts on or pants, and we're submerged and surrounded by water. I remember having, of course, a completely different experience, but something that sounds similar. This summer, I was at a gathering of beautiful people in the forest, and there was a river, and for the first time around a large group, I decided to get in the river naked. And similarly, there's no feeling quite like it, just feeling all the water coming over everything, like a real cleansing. And natural. It's like I didn't know what I'd been missing out on.
Yeah, there is a big part of that. It's kind of like also the way I like to describe like the first time I ever took MDMA or like these sorts of things was kind of, it expands the realm of the possible. And it's like these places in that you never even was completely outside your reality that might exist.
Yeah.
So and then of course once you've visited them with whatever help, it's like the journey of life is then okay how to integrate it so that it's part of you and not something that you can just get when like on a trip or something like that.
So how did you integrate it? This experience of naked naturalness.
So yeah, and I kind of I was on a bit of a mission to overcome this thing, and when I went traveling. First, I tried to go to a nudist banana farm as a woofer to work for food and.
Woofing is when you volunteer, and you don't pay someone to stay at their place, but your volunteering basically pays your accommodation
And food.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in Australia and it was a nudist banana farm. So like, okay, this will kind of be like a great way for me to test to see if I can do it. The only problem was when I got there was other woofers there who really weren't into that nudist thing at all. And there was this like amazing shower that was like outside and in the rainforest with a view like down the mountains and over the ocean.
Sounds like a dream.
It was amazing, and like these other woofers who were there with me, they were kept their like clothes like pants on while they were having a shower, and I'm like, okay, this is not helping me to like
to break out of this.
to break out.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going to a festival called Confest, where half the festival is naked all the time.
Okay.
And then this was the first time I was fully like comfortable being naked in front of people, very liberated.
In that scenario, do you find it comforting because everybody else is naked and you can see that everybody is so unique and has all their different features?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Like, I got, like, after I overcame my nudity thing, I got very kind of, like, activist about it, and I did, like, the World Naked Bike Ride through London, like, naked in front of Big Ben and Buckingham Palace and stuff.
I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, like, I was just like, it's no wonder there's so much body shame. Like, the only reference points we have for what a naked body looks like is, like, supermodels or porn, and there's, like, and also the fact that what's the reaction to being naked? It's either ridicule, it's shame, it's like anger, it's hate. Like there's all of these negative connotations to how people react if they saw you naked. So like no wonder we have these body issues. It's like there's something wrong with my body. I can't show it. And then we never get the reference point of like when you're at a festival and everyone's naked and you just see all day like this huge spectrum of what bodies look like and what genitals look like, and nobody, and like some people are prancing and things, but people are just kind of going about their day.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is like revolutionary.
Yes. I've not yet been to a naked festival, and I can tell you I really would love to go to one, to have that feeling of being around other people who, I'm sure there's some people at the festival who feel uncomfortable at first, but who are coming out of a shell and coming out of a standard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to share about your journey to...
So the next big thing, which is kind of like now the main thing, is that I met ISTA, the International School of Temple Arts, and I was at a festival. I went to a Tantra workshop, and the facilitator told us about this ISTA, and they said it was the sex education you wish you'd had. And their level 1 is called the Spiritual Sexual Shamanic Experience. And I saw this and I'm just like, okay, I have to go. Like, and first I went to one of their weekend like tasters, and it took me like another 2 years before, 3 years, 2 years I think, before I actually went and did the training. But like this kind of like was the first time I really felt like people were dealing with the subjects that I needed.
In a safe and held space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And giving you tools.
Yeah. So yeah, and then it took me another 3 years, like, and I went and lived in this kind of sex positive queer community in London, and that was also me pushing myself because at the start of this, especially when I was in that place of not knowing if I'd had an orgasm, I realised I couldn't even say the word sex. I could hardly even write the
it's
word
like
sex.
Voldemort.
Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
it? You're not supposed to say the word Voldemort. And it's like that with orgasm, sex, masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
They're all words.
Yeah.
And I think they should and can be said more.
Yeah. And so this was also part of me like trying to get myself in a space where it was normalized so that I could start talking about these things, which really helped. Like this was really like, it's kind of like the hot topic of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes now I feel like I've gone the other way, I'm a bit obsessed. Like whenever someone's talking about sex, I'm super interested and I'm super animated, and then we're talking about anything else about their day, it's like, oh yeah, that's nice.
I think that's actually really natural though. If something has been so squashed down, it just wants to like burst out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been on quite a deep dive with them, especially since 2018, and it's kind of built up now to where I really feel like I want to bring this out and be a practitioner and help people to find their way.
And you've been helping out on ISTA now.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already totally got your foot in the door there of like being able to be of service.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I did the practitioner training as well, which is specifically aimed at teaching you how to hold someone like one-on-one through the processes.
Is there a single thing that you would go back and tell your younger self that you've learned that she would be totally oblivious to?
Like, I don't know, just masturbate more. It's good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, if I could go back to right in the very early stages where I first started exploring myself, to tell myself, yeah, keep going, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I kind of realised what was happening, I always felt like, oh, I shouldn't do that. And
a little bit of shutting down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, I have another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so important that we are able to have, not only with sex, but in self-pleasure, a positive relationship with that? And how does that impact the rest of our day and the rest of our lives? Like our relationships, just our general interactions. I'm going to pop in a bit.
Yeah, it feels like there's a few angles to answer that question from. There's just this thing of like our sexuality is connected to all that we are and all that we do, and all that we are and all that we do is connected to our sexuality. It kind of feels like if there's things you're like, when you're not in alignment with yourself in everyday life, you can kind of muddle through. Like if you're really bad at boundaries, or you're kind of a people pleaser, and in your job you're probably rewarded for that, in your friendship circles you're probably like, you might feel a bit not really getting my needs met, but at least people like me.
You get that validation.
So you can kind of get through life, but when it comes to sexuality, if you have bad boundaries, then you can actually really hurt yourself, and you can actually really hurt someone else. So I kind of feel like when we come to our sexuality in our relationships, everything is magnified, and that's kind of what I kind of feel like shamanic sexuality is all about, because from like what, to me anyway, like shamanism is kind of the willingness to go into the dark. And it's usually using some medicine, some technique, whether it's drumming, whether it's some plant medicine or whatever, and to put you in this kind of altered state of mind so that you can journey to these places in your being that you maybe don't really want to face because they're scary, because you don't like them, because like.
And do you find there's a lot of the dark shadow in sexuality? Oh
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, that's kind of why I think, like in shamanic sexuality, we're using sexuality as the medicine. So we're not using plant medicine, we're using sexual energy as the medicine to get the rocket fuel for the ship. And it's kind of like when you drop sexual energy into a room, like, okay, on the ISTA courses, it's a week-long process, and everyone's turned up wanting to question their sexuality, because that's what the course is called. So it's like as soon as you enter the room and you realize everyone's kind of like, ooh, like, oh, who's attractive, who's not attractive, do people like me, like, and it just kind of, as soon as even the possibility of sexual connection is there, all of your shit comes up, all of your like shame, all of your insecurity, like, so if
attachment styles, like wanting to run away or like cling to something.
So it just kind of feels like if you want to work on your shadows, or if you drop sexual energy into it, like it's just like this amplifier and you can see stuff, and so okay, you can work with it.
I've found that with romantic relationship, it's like just, and that's where sexual energy lies. I think romantic relationship isn't just about having sex compared to like with a friend. I think there's a lot more to it. But I find that in relationship, so much shit comes up. And I think it could be, and it's interesting just thinking about this now, it could be because there's that element of sexual energy there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm self-inquiring. Oh, we had a bit of flash.
I mean, yeah, they always say that relationship is the deepest study of, like, I mean, I think you can go into a relationship with different intentions, but I think that relationships will always challenge us.
Yeah.
And we have a habit of selecting the person who is going to trigger the thing that we need to work on next.
Yeah.
And if you enter a relationship with that mindset, then you can like help each other and work on it. But if you kind of enter the relationship and don't understand that, then as soon as these things happen, it's kind of like, oh, what went wrong? Like, this person is shit, like, oh, whatever. So it's kind of like, especially if you have a pattern of always attracting this, or being attracted to the same type of person that lets you down in a certain type of way, then it's kind of like, okay, why am I selecting these people? What is it in me that, what is the message? Yeah.
And is there also a sense of being addicted to the pain and uncomfortable patterns that shows up in the shadow?
It can be that. I remember, like, it felt like for many years I was really working on this sense of feeling broken in my sexuality, and it kind of stemmed from this not knowing if I'd had an orgasm, which, like, the conclusion to that story several years later was that, okay, I kind of isolated an experience, was like, okay, that was definitely an orgasm.
Yes!
Like I felt there's like, you know, there's this rise of energy, there's like a release, and then there's a fall, and there was like the kind of contractions in the Yoni, and I'm like, okay, so that was an orgasm, but no, I've always had that.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized that was quite a normal experience. I just kind of had this feeling that orgasm was something more, or something else, or something more like earth-shattering, or so. But even after that experience, there was an ongoing sense of like, my sexuality is not working normally, or like it should, or like other people's.
What even is normal?
Well, exactly.
Exactly.
And after doing a lot of work, there was one experience I had which really felt like something changed, and I went through like 3 months of like a real deep kind of dark winter in a way. And I was using the tools that Ista taught me, like emotional processing tools, and like pretty much every night I was releasing, I was crying, I felt like I was in this spiral of grief, and I didn't really even know what it was I was grieving, and it just went on and on for weeks and like months, and I was like, does it ever end? Like, is there a bottom to it? And at some point I hit, like I hit something, I hit a bottom, and like I was like, oh. And kind of after this experience, like, it kind of felt like I could make a choice in that moment of like what's worth living for, and it was like a part of me had to die, like the part of me that held me back, the part of me that didn't like allow myself to go for what I wanted or whatever, like that part of me is like, it's not actually worth me like living in a way, like, unless I change that. So I had to bring in kind of the will to change, and not listen to that part of myself anymore. And then after that experience, this kind of, it almost always felt like a thorn in my heart, and it felt like it was no longer there. But that brought with it this sense of real disorientation, because this had been what had been driving me for so long. Like, it had been driving me to heal. It had been driving me to like on this path.
And it's uncomfortable to be in the unknown because it's unknown.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of comfort in the things that we are familiar with.
Yeah.
So I always think that anybody who's willing and committed to change and growth, even through the discomfort, is brave. And I think, just like you said, a part of you has to die. In this type of realm of work or spirituality, there's so many little subtle deaths in ourselves. Because as we grow in 2 years' time, you may not be the same Joy, and I may not be the same Lorna, and it's about that constant evolution in depth. And some people, I believe, have bigger deaths, and it sounds like you had quite a big death in a way.
Yeah, and it's having the trust that there's something on the other side. I think, because I was kind of in depression for a couple of years at some point, and I think
even after doing...
No, this was before. But I kind of, sometimes I go back into it, but now it's not really, like, I know it doesn't have the same, like, kind of, like, soul depth of, like, everything is awful like it used to. But yeah, when I kind of was depressed for a couple of years, this was before I did my second ISTA, but after I did my first ISTA. And I kind of like, the more I learn the tools and things, the more it feels like what keeps me in that state of depression. Because depression isn't actually feeling, well, for me anyway, other people might have different experience, but for me it wasn't actually a feeling of anything really. It was more of a numbness. It was just like there's no colour to life. There's no reason to do anything. Nobody will love me. Like, and yes, sometimes I might cry and I might feel things like that, but most of the time actually it was just like I can just sit and look at the wall and wonder what's the point.
So what was that thing that through that, having that feeling at the bottom, what was that thing that helped you like feel like, oh, there is something worth going for?
Well, I think because those kind of 3 months where I was processing, it was like being able to face that level of grief and being able to go through that level of grief because I learned these tools. It was like having the trust that, okay, this is the feeling that's here, so I have to feel it and not
suppress it, because then it'll just be shoved down even more.
Yeah, and that wasn't even an option anymore. Yeah. Like for me, like that I can just see that any way I have to try and run away from it isn't going to lead me anywhere. So I was like, I just have to go through it. So yeah, I think often it's about having the courage to face the things that you don't believe you might survive actually.
Wow. Gotta get that in a quote book. Sometimes it's having the courage to face what you think you might not survive.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And you have. And many people think they can't survive their deepest feelings of fear and sadness, and they do.
And it's nice, like it really helps to know that other people have been through it. Like, because I mean, I did ISTA and I also did the Haydn Temple training, which is related, but it's slightly different as well. But like there, I really felt like there's people, like when you go through that process, in the end, it has to be done alone. But there's people who can kind of walk you there and give you faith that there's something on the other side. And they're kind of rooting for you. So even though in that piece you're really alone, it really helps to know that other people have been through it and that they survived and they're like encouraging.
So now I'm curious, what is it in the work that you do that you want to bring forward the most for other people in being of service?
I mean, when I come out into normal society, instead of in my little bubble of people who do this work, it's really the basics. It's it's boundaries and consent. It's the emotional processing tools. It's like loving your body, And I just want everyone to touch each other and cuddle, and we've relegated all affection to relationships, which on the one hand puts strain within the relationship because that's the only place you can get it from, and if you're not in a relationship, you're just completely
cut out from having that closeness.
And you like, men can't show any kind of affection to other men, and like women maybe have it a bit easier because that's more okay.
One thing I still find baffling, it's a little bit off topic, is sitting on a train and everybody's sat alone. And even if there's seats available next to each other, they find another section where they're not close to another human because everybody seems to feel like they can't interact with each other anymore. Not even on a physical level, but on an emotional and talking level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also very guilty of that.
Me too. Me too. Me too.
But I'm like, but then I've always been a bit awkward around people, so.
But I bet if there was a cuddle puddle on a train, you'd get involved.
I would.
Yeah.
But that's why it's important first to do the boundary work, because like, you can't have safe touch if you don't have solid boundaries. And I think the world's starting to get a bit more up on boundaries, but I feel like there's still so much more depth to explore. Like, even we can say no, but like actually knowing where your boundaries are in the first place.
Could you give an example for somebody watching who might get the concept of boundaries but not really know how to implement them? Just like a small little taster of what that could look like.
Yeah, so there's one. There's the first exercise that I do with people is, I mean, if there's a group of people and you find someone and you ask them a question, a yes or no question, and they have to say no, but it's slightly more nuanced than that, because the person who's being asked, it's not just that they just say no without thinking. It's like you take a breath and you allow the question to land first. And you like take a breath. And then you say no, thank you for asking. And there's a few things to that. It's like there's no apology, there's no explanation, but there is a kind of acknowledgement of how hard it is to ask. So we come with a thank you.
Yeah.
But the purpose of taking the breath is just like, because you have to say no whatever anyone asks. So maybe they ask a question and you really actually want to say yes, like, oh, I really want to give you $100, like whatever, and you really I want to say yes. But in
this exercise you have to say no.
In the exercise you have to say no. So like, what does it feel like when you say no and you really mean no, and what does it feel like when you say no and actually you wanted to say yes? And then the person who receives the no, they then say, thank you for taking care of yourself. And this is like the acknowledgement of, you don't want anyone to say yes when they don't mean yes. Like, okay, you might like, rejection might be hard to take, but doing something that's not right for the other person is worse, surely.
Absolutely.
Like who doesn't agree with that? And so there's that, like, actually thank you for saying no. And then when we do it the other way around, we say yes, but we don't do the thing. Yes. So you have to say yes, but you don't actually do it.
And then you can feel what it feels like in your body to say yes when it's actually a no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is usually a familiar experience for people.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, this is really familiar. All those times I said yes, I didn't actually mean yes. And like, this is the important part of this, is not just to go to what your mind thinks your boundaries should be. So it's like your mind might be, you might be standing in front of one person and say, can I hug you? And you're like, yeah, sure, I know, yeah, that's great. And you're standing in front of another person and they ask, can you hug me? And your body might be like, no, but your rational mind is like, hang on, this person is just as, like, there's no reason for me to reject this person. I didn't know that person a minute ago, I don't know this person a minute ago, so I'm going to override my body's no because it doesn't make sense. And it's like, first you have to listen to your body. And like, especially if your body's been through trauma, and I think we all have, in some, like, little traumas, and even if it's not yours, like, I really feel like I inherit, like, I have ancestral trauma or collective trauma or something.
I believe that everybody has trauma, and one person's trauma as a kid I mentioned this in an episode with my mum, who's not got their ice cream, versus another child's trauma who's had abuse. They're both trauma.
Yeah.
And it can play out in different ways as an adult, but it's not about like making this person's trauma more than that person's trauma. It plays out in everybody. Yeah,
and like maybe your body's having a reaction to this person because they've got a moustache, and someone who bullied you at school used to have a moustache, or like, you know, they might not be rational, but for your body first has to feel like it's listened to, and then maybe when your body feels safe, you can be like, look, this aversion you have to moustaches, it's not really serving you anymore. Maybe we'll go and find someone who we trust, who has a moustache that we can like
work out,
working out with. But if you're just always pushing your body, being like, no, you're being stupid, like go and like hug this person, your body's just going to keep freezing.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the piece around dealing with like growth. I like to see the 3 rings of like, there's the comfort zone in the center where, you know, is quite a happy place to hang out, but it kind of gets boring after a while. And then there's like your zone of growth, so you can like dip your toe into, oh, this is uncomfortable, but there's evolution, there's growth, there's healing. But if you go too far out into like this, like it becomes a zone of trauma. And when you go too far, what happens is you either disassociate, so you kind of leave your body a little bit, or you go into freeze. And in those places, there's no healing that's taking place anymore. And as soon as you come back, you're going to go right to the center of your comfort zone and not leave. And be like, no, it's too scary. So like, and like one person's growth zone could look completely different to another person's. And only you can know. And there's no teacher that can tell you. And I think this is one of the really vital things when going into like any kind of sexual modality, is like, no matter how experienced the teacher is, and no matter like how much you admire them, nobody but you can know where your boundaries are.
Yes. And I think you'll probably agree with how important this is, regardless of somebody's reaction to your boundary, because we're not all going to be around people like from ISTA or who have this awareness. Regardless of what they think or say in response, that's not your responsibility. That's theirs.
Yeah.
Would you like to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's kind of like your boundaries are no one else's responsibility. And I feel like, I mean, the consent culture that's growing is a very positive thing, and making people aware of the difficulty of people to say no, and how important it is to respect people's boundaries. That's super important. But in the end, you can never control someone else's reaction.
Yeah.
And you're going to meet people in life that haven't had this kind of training, and it's like, there's this sense of how can you actually have really solid boundaries that like, it becomes, you have this energy that people just don't cross, and I find this difficult to explain.
It's like, for example, we had a little chat about this the other day. I have someone really dear and close in my life who I love so much, and I've put a boundary in place, and they, regardless of how many times I've said something about, I would really prefer that you don't continue doing that, and they keep doing it just out of old habit and old pattern, and I don't blame them for that. Yes, it's challenging. And I came to you and I said, Joy, what wisdom can you share with me about this? And it went along the lines of this thing that's hard to explain. Like there's one thing saying, I don't want you to do this anymore, and there's one thing really believing that if you were to have an energetic shield, like, this will not come into my field anymore. It's just not even possible for this person to say, because it's so clear in my energy, it's an unspoken thing.
Yeah. There's this way to really, okay, you can say something with words, or you can say something with your whole body. You can say something with your whole energy. And like, on the whole, people aren't purposefully trying to hurt you. And I remember being in a club, and there was this guy who was a little bit drunk and was following me around, and I was like trying to give him all of the usual hints about, okay,
looking away.
Can you just go away? Yeah. And he just didn't. And then I was just like, okay, I have to do something about this. So I just turned to him and looked at him and gave him eye contact for like, a few seconds. That was a bit, until it got a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then I was just like this, and I was just like, and then
You physically did that.
Yeah, I didn't touch him.
Yeah.
But it was just this symbol of like, it was like with my whole energy field and everything, and look like making sure I had his full attention. It was just like, no.
Yeah.
And then from that moment, he never bothered me again.
And you didn't even need to say no. Or did
No,
you
I didn't say anything. I mean, it was
No.
loud. Like,
Yeah.
you couldn't really hear each other anyway.
That just shows that actions and energy and that motion can speak more than a conversation.
Yeah, and the other part of it is also becoming, like, when I'm looking at him in the eyes, I'm not thinking he's a bad human being.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm respecting that he's a human. He has unmet needs. He's, maybe he's lonely. Like, I can have that compassion for him and his journey, and he must be in, like, really quite a desperate and unhappy place, maybe. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, like, having that compassion, but also being like, and it's not my job.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Wow. Amazing. So now we've covered a bit about, we went into boundaries there and reclaiming your sexuality and this awesome journey that you've been on and it becoming a big part of your life. One thing that I would love to talk about is menstrual blood because I think it's in a similar...
I should have brought the picture.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
If you check out my website, you'll see my painting of this process.
The website is?
joymittens.life.
Joymittens.life. So I've been on a journey of reclaiming the power and the medicine of my menstrual blood. And it's to the point now where a lot of people would be repulsed by the fact that I will, I use a menstrual cup and I collect my blood and I will paint with my blood and I will do ritual with my blood and put it on parts of my body.
Do you drink it?
I don't drink it. I do put it in some of my plants, and I usually do a ceremony because I usually bleed at the full moon, and I give my blood back to the earth, and I say thank you. This is me shedding and the womb of Mother Earth, giving it back to you. And at first I had a real shame about. I thought there's no way I'm ever going to tell anybody about this ever. And then when I started to open up about it, I was like, do you know what? I want people to know how magic and important this process is of bleeding as a woman and having a womb, the womb man. So yeah, I'd love to know a bit about your experience of like why that's involved in sexuality and why it's important to reclaim.
Yeah, like menstruation, it's this whole area of being human in a female body that is shamed. And it's like, just for having a womb, we are shamed. And that is like the ultimate patriarchy.
I can't help that I have a womb.
And it's like, I remember once being out in, I think I was in London, and I had my menstrual cup in. It must have been my first day of bleeding because it was really heavy. And I was sitting somewhere at a train station, or not eating, or just minding my own business. And then I stood up, and then I feel that, oh, it's full. And I feel it's it's really overflowing. And I'm like, okay, where's the nearest toilet? And I'm looking around, and I have to find a place. There's a queue that you have to pay to get in. And by the time I kind of got in there, I'm like, I'm so glad I'm wearing black trousers because otherwise there would be this red stain. Like, there was so much of it. And I'm like, why is this the most shameful thing in the world? Like, can you imagine anyone walking down the street with blood stain on their trousers? Like, this is kind of the ultimate shame taboo, everything. And I actually had this like dream that one day, maybe on like National Menstruation Day or whatever day of the year that is, I don't know, but like actually going around London with a group of women wearing white trousers with blood stains on them, and this just being like,
blame it. This was I was gonna say, this is the thing. Growing up, it's like if you're on your period, you can't wear white.
Yeah.
You can't. It's just a no-go.
Yeah.
Because what if somebody saw, what if that embarrassment, and no one wants to feel embarrassed.
Yeah, and so that's like the first layer, the like less spiritual layer.
Yeah.
And I was on the contraceptive pill since I was 17, I think, and then I got the coil, which meant I didn't even bleed at all. And then I started doing this kind of work, and I started thinking like, wow, I need to connect to my natural cycle again. So I had it removed, and I was on it maybe like 10 years when I didn't have a natural cycle. And since then I just feel like I've missed out on like 10 years of wisdom, and now I'm like learning my cycle and learning my moods, and
the seasons,
the connect, like it's so connecting with the earth and this cycle of death and rebirth, yeah, and like it kind of also is another way that women have been made to be more like men, is like, especially if you're working in an office or whatever, you're not allowed to have cycles. You're not allowed to be, in the first half of your cycle you have all this energy and you're creative or whatever, and in the second half you're really inside, and maybe you're like angry a lot or whatever. Like PMS is kind of like the ultimate way to dismiss our emotions, like, oh, she's just premenstrual, and it's like, there's a reason for this. Like nature is wise.
My friend recently said, I'm bleeding, and I feel like, she called her bleed the oracle. She said, I'm going to listen to the oracle because there's so much wisdom. And that friend, I won't mention who, but she ended up going out naked into the woods in the mud, being primal, and that's because that's what her body needed, despite what her brain told her was okay and wrong and blah blah blah, all the mind chatter. Her body took her there, and afterwards she said it was the most fucking epic thing ever. Yeah,
there is this powerful, like, I mean, because I studied evolution at university, so I'm also connected with kind of that scientific modality of how we got to where we are, and it is connecting to the animal, and to, it's like, we are animals. We're just fucking animals. And
evolved animals.
Like, but to make that part of us wrong, it's kind of like we're in this like civilized society. And so, this is a nice thing I like to say, like, our sexuality is the last refuge of our wild and untamable nature. And it's kind of like, no matter how civilized we become, how rational, how like proper or whatever, our sexuality is the piece that won't be tamed. It's the piece that is activated when it shouldn't be, or isn't activated when it should be, or is like...
If you go in a room, even in a relationship, where apparently you're not allowed to be attracted to anyone else in the view of society and with certain partners, you go in a room and you physically can't help if you find someone so hot or like drop dead gorgeous. Yeah.
And even like when... I mean, it's the thing that all men have to go through when they're growing up, is like the inappropriate erection when they're coming into puberty, and it's like, that's also that intense shame. And it's
how
like,
dare you be sexually aroused just now, and even if there's not something specifically to stimulate it.
And it's like, and no wonder there's all of this problems that men are having with their erections, with all of this stuff, when the first message they get as reaching puberty is like, that's not allowed. Like, that's
and it's
wrong.
Something they literally
and they have no control over.
Control.
So like,
power to the penis. So, in this wild and untamable sexuality, what can we learn from it? I mean, there's so much to learn from it, but how can we... Oh, here's a good question. How can we bring it into our daily lives? How can we work with it?
This is connecting to anger for me. It might be a slight segue.
Let's go for it.
But it's this thing around. So we do a lot of work around emotions in ISTA.
It's not just lots of people having sex.
In fact, it's very usually not that at all.
Yes.
I mean, it can be.
I can see how people would have ideas that it is.
Yeah.
So it's good to mention that it's not.
And I'd really recommend if anyone's interested. There's a recent podcast by two of the facilitators, Ohad and Yasmin, where they really go into what the level 1 is all about. And that's really brilliant. And I think one of the first quotes is like, people come thinking they're going to have these wild sexual experiences, and they spend most of the time crying.
Yeah.
But they're alive.
Yeah.
And they're vibrating. And yeah, coming around to anger seems like a really good example. Is we have this idea in society that anger is always bad, that it can only hurt, it can only damage, and so we suppress it, we bottle it up inside of us, and that will either make us just really numb, because you can't suppress one without suppressing everything, or it makes us explosive. It's like, well, we suppress it, and then one day it explodes.
And it can be hurtful.
Yeah, and then it hurts someone. And then everyone's like, see, look, anger's dangerous. Yeah. Anger's only bad. And if we can actually get to like healthy expressions of anger where we can let it run through our system in a way that doesn't hurt anyone, but allows our body to feel the vibration, then it really comes with so much empowerment. And like, this is where your boundaries come from. Like, you can't really have that energetic no if you haven't got like this anger, this like energy healthy of like anger? Just you don't fuck with me.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, it gives you the courage to stand up for what you believe in. So it's yeah, and like how to bring that into your everyday life is kind of like when anger's not suppressed and it's able to run cleanly in your body, it brings that sense of purpose. It brings that sense of being able
clarity
to clarity and be, and courage.
So how do you do that? How do you let anger run through healthily?
If I feel it's really activated and it needs to move, then there's lots of things like hitting pillows and screaming.
Not people. Pillows, not people.
Pillows, yeah. Yeah, and it's like really allowing it to come through from the lower parts, like your kind of sacral center, your like, and just being like, ha! And there's so many different tools to allow that to happen.
And I remember being younger, actually, and wanting to go out into a field and scream, because I felt like there was so much pent up energy, and thinking, how can I even get out and no one think I'm crazy?
Yeah.
And for years I didn't ever manage to do it. And then eventually one day I ended up with my mum being in a field in the middle of the Scottish mountains and being able to like let this dragon loose, like this pure like, ah! And I think when I talk to people, I hear that they also have that bottled up anger that they just want to let out.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be angry about.
Yeah.
Like, our boundaries get crossed all the time. And I think as another part of when you start to connect with your body, and also with this yes-no exercise, when you actually start to really listen to your body, the first thing that you feel, like the first thing your body tells you is how pissed off it is. That you haven't been listening to it for so long.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's about time to round up. Is there anything else you feel like you'd like to share before I ask the final question?
I don't know, nothing particular.
Okay. So, if you had an audience of the whole wide world in front of you right now, and you had a big megaphone or a huge speaker, and you could say something or a sentence or anything or spread something to everybody for positive impact, what would you share?
That's a hard one.
It might be different tomorrow, might be different the next day, but right now.
The whole world. I mean, I don't know, it seems like a lot of like wise things that I could say, but actually just like take a breath and enjoy don't forget to enjoy it.
I got total tingles when you said that. Of all the wise things, something as simple as that. Just take a breath and don't forget to enjoy it. Wow. Thank you so much, Joy. It's been amazing having you on the podcast with your sex shaman wisdom. You claim that. It's amazing. And I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of you. And facilitating and starting your tantric empire.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible.
Yeah. You can find me in Joy Mittens Up Life. I might be staying in Glastonbury.
Yes. I hope so. Yeah. Anything else people could reach out to you on, or is that the best place?
Yeah, that's my website. That's also my Facebook handle. On Instagram, I'm joy.mittens.
Great.
Yeah, that's it.
I would definitely check out the piece of artwork.
Yeah.
That Joy's done. It's truly outrageously empowering.
And it's actually from an experience I had.
How freaking cool is that? 5. Woo! Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week. Namaste. Namaste.